I was on a tour to visit the Pharaoh's tomb. As we arrived, I could feel the excitement building up inside me. I was part of a group of tourists, all eager to learn about the Pharaoh and his magnificent tomb. Our tour guide, an elderly man with a kind face, greeted us at the entrance of the tomb. He led us inside, pointing out various artifacts and murals on the way, and explained their significance. I was fascinated by the intricate details and rich history of the tomb. But as the tour progressed, I realized that the other members of the group were moving too quickly for me. They were rushing past the displays, barely pausing to take a closer look. I, on the other hand, wanted to savor every moment and absorb every detail. I tried to slow down and take my time, but I soon fell behind. The group was moving too fast, and I was unable to keep up. I felt frustrated and left out. I wanted to enjoy the tour at my own pace, but I also didn't want to miss out on any important information. As we moved deeper into the tomb, I began to feel a strange connection with the Pharaoh. It was as if his spirit was calling out to me, drawing me closer to him. I felt a deep longing to learn more about him, to understand who he was and what he stood for. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to keep up with the group. They seemed oblivious to my presence, focused only on the tour guide's words. I tried to speak up, to ask them to slow down and wait for me, but they ignored me. 2 times I raised my hand wanting to ask the tour guide some questions, but he did not acknowledge me. When the tour guide mentioned that the Pharaoh had 8 wives, I tried to correct him by pointing out that it should be 9. However, he continued to ignore me. I felt like he did not like to be corrected. As we approached a painting of the Pharaoh, my heart sank. I felt a sense of déjà vu, as if I had seen this image before. And then it hit me, I was the Pharaoh. Or rather, I was the spirit of the Pharaoh. After I died, my spirit lingered around my tomb for thousands of years, sometimes forgetting who I was and mistaking myself for one of the tourists in the group. Now it all made sense. The reason I felt such a strong connection to the Pharaoh was because I was him. The tourists and tour guide had ignored me not because they didn't care, but because they couldn't even see me, as I was the spirit of the Pharaoh, lingering around my tomb for thousands of years.
One day, a girl was heading to her bedroom when she heard someone speaking inside. She knew it couldn't be her parents because they were downstairs. Despite being scared, she decided to investigate, and she stood next to her bedroom door to listen more carefully. Suddenly, the talking stopped, and she realized that the person inside had noticed someone was listening, so he had become quiet. Feeling uneasy, the girl quickly went downstairs to tell her parents about the incident. Her parents were shocked, and her dad grabbed a baseball bat and went upstairs to check the room. However, to their surprise, they found no one inside. The window was also locked from the inside, making it impossible for someone to enter the room, talk, and then leave through the window. The parents thought it was just the girl's imagination and dismissed the incident. The following night, after brushing her teeth, the girl heard the talking again, and she quickly opened the door to check. However, she found no one inside the room, and this made her feel even more uneasy. The third night, she decided to take action and pretended to leave her bedroom to head to the bathroom to brush her teeth. Instead, she stood closely against the wall next to her door and listened carefully inside. She made sure her shadow was away from the door, so the person inside wouldn't see her shadow from underneath the door. And then, she heard the talking again. She was shocked to hear someone addressing himself as a pencil box. Unable to believe her ears, the girl quickly opened the door and picked up her pencil box, shaking it to make it speak up. To her amazement, the pencil box started talking. Initially, she found it creepy, but the pencil box explained everything to her. It said that 4 days ago, a tiny asteroid had landed on Earth a mile away. A strange power had been released from the asteroid that had reached inside the pencil box in the girl's bedroom, making it come alive. The girl was finally able to understand what had been happening. The following day, she went into the woods and found the site where the asteroid had landed. It was just a tiny asteroid, so there had been no explosion or loud sound when it landed. Over time, the girl and her talking pencil box became good friends, but their friendship was short-lived. The pencil box's life lasted only a month, and when it died, the girl buried it in the backyard. Sadly, the girl's parents never knew about the talking pencil box and thought their daughter's behavior was strange and crazy. When they saw their daughter buried a pencil box, they thought that was too much. They eventually sent her to boarding school so they wouldn't have to deal with her odd behavior.
John woke up with a throbbing headache, feeling as though he'd been hit by a truck. He fumbled around on his nightstand, searching for the painkillers he kept there. He found the bottle, counted out 5 pills, and gulped them down with water. As the minutes ticked by, he realized that the headache wasn't getting any better. It was as if the pain was coming from somewhere specific, rather than just being a general headache. He reached up to touch the back of his head, and his fingers came away wet with blood. Suddenly, a wave of panic washed over him. What had happened to him last night? He had no memory of anything after leaving the bar. Had he been in a fight? Fallen down a flight of stairs? He stumbled into the bathroom and tried to examine the wound in the mirror, but he couldn't see it clearly. The pain was getting worse by the second, and he could feel his eyes starting to close involuntarily. He tried to fight it, but it was as if his body had a mind of its own. Then, something strange happened. He could still see, even though his eyes were closed. It was as if he had a second pair of eyes on the back of his head. He reached up to touch the wound again, but this time, it felt like he was touching an eyeball. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of light, and John screamed in agony. When he opened his eyes again, he saw something he never could have imagined. In the place of the wound, there was a fully formed eye, blinking and darting around just like his other 2. But this one was on the back of his head. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was he hallucinating? Had he gone insane? He stumbled out of the bathroom and into the living room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But he couldn't deny the evidence before him. There was a third eye on the back of his head, and it was his. As the day went on, John tried to figure out what to do. He knew that no one would believe him if he told them what had happened. He couldn't even believe it himself. But as he went about his day, he realized that he could see things that he never could before. He had a newfound sense of depth perception and awareness of his surroundings. John knew that his life would never be the same again, but he was determined to make the best of it. He would learn to control his new eye and use it to his advantage. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that he was ready for whatever came next.
Paula had always been an A student, but she struggled with math. So when she got assigned to Mr. Smith's math class, she was excited to finally get the help she needed. But as soon as she walked into the classroom, she felt uneasy. The walls were a sickly shade of yellow, and the blackboard was old and covered in scratches. Mr. Smith, a strange-looking man with piercing eyes and a crooked smile, sat at his desk in the front of the classroom. Paula took her seat and pulled out her cell phone, hoping to find some solace in her favorite game. But when she looked down, she saw that her phone was off even though she was sure she had charged it last night. As Mr. Smith started the lesson, Paula's uneasiness grew. He talked in a slow, monotonous voice, and his words seemed to blend together. Paula tried to focus on what he was saying, but her mind kept drifting. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise coming from the old blackboard. It sounded like scratching, as if someone was writing on it. She looked up and saw that the board was now covered in strange symbols, as if some otherworldly language had been etched onto it. Paula rubbed her eyes, thinking she was imagining things. But when she looked back up, the symbols were still there, and they seemed to be moving. Paula looked around the classroom, but no one else seemed to notice the strange occurrence. Mr. Smith continued talking, seemingly oblivious to the symbols on the board. Paula's phone suddenly turned on, and she received a text from an unknown number that simply read, "Get out now." She looked up at the blackboard again, and the symbols had now formed into the shape of a figure. The figure was tall and shadowy, and it seemed to be beckoning Paula towards it. Paula's heart was racing, and she knew she needed to leave. She quickly packed up her things and headed for the door. But as she tried to open it, she found it was locked. She turned around and saw that Mr. Smith was now standing in front of the blackboard, staring at her with his piercing eyes. "Leaving so soon, Paula?" he asked in a menacing tone. Paula could feel her hands shaking as she tried to open the door again, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, the symbols on the board started to glow, and the figure started to move towards Paula. She screamed and backed away, but she was trapped. Just as the figure was about to engulf her, Paula's phone rang. It was her mom, who had been trying to reach her. Paula answered, and suddenly everything went black. When Paula woke up, she was outside the classroom, surrounded by concerned classmates and teachers. She had fainted, and no one knew what had happened to her. Paula's phone was in her hand, and it was still on the call with her mom. When her mom answered, she could hear the fear in Paula's voice as she told her what had happened. To this day, Paula can't explain what she saw in that classroom, but she knows it was something otherworldly. And every time she passes by that old math classroom, she can still hear the scratching of the symbols on the blackboard, calling out to her.
As the man entered the shopping mall, he was immediately greeted with a sea of people. The mall was massive, and the hustle and bustle of the shoppers made it seem even more overwhelming. Despite the crowds, the man felt a sense of familiarity. He had been to this mall many times before and knew his way around. As he walked through the aisles, he came across various shops and stores that he recognized. He enjoyed the experience of browsing and occasionally purchasing items he needed. As he continued walking, he noticed an escalator leading to the top floor of the mall. The top floor was less crowded than the others, and he enjoyed the quietness that it provided. The shops on the top floor were sparsely populated, and it felt like a small haven from the chaos below. However, as he walked deeper into the floor, he noticed a group of people waiting in a line. They were different from the other shoppers he had seen earlier. They had no expressions on their faces and seemed to be waiting in silence. As the man approached the line, he felt a sense of unease. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something felt off about this group. He discovered that the line led to an escalator that led to a higher floor. The man was surprised since he was unaware of the existence of another floor. The people in the line had a peculiar way of moving. They seemed to be shuffling forward slowly, as if in a trance. The man watched as they rode the escalator up and disappeared from view. Curiosity got the better of him, and the man decided to follow the group. He rode the escalator up to the next level and was shocked by what he saw. The area was small and dimly lit, with no shops or stores in sight. There were a few people scattered around the area, but they too appeared lifeless and hollow-eyed. As he stood there, taking in the scene, an old man in line spoke to him. The old man was the only one who had noticed the newcomer and approached him with a warning. The old man explained that this area was for those who no longer wanted their souls. The escalator would suck out their souls, and they would return by riding the second escalator down, becoming hollow and lifeless. The man was frightened by what he heard and quickly left the area, rushing down the escalator. He was glad to be back in the normal section of the mall, with its bright lights and cheerful shoppers. He continued to visit the mall but never encountered the strange corner on the top floor again. Over time, the man couldn't shake the strange experience he had encountered. He tried to research it online, but there was no information on the escalator or the people he had seen. He started to believe that it was a figment of his imagination or a nightmare. One day, years later, the man stumbled upon an old book in a second-hand store. The book was written by an anonymous author and detailed the existence of a parallel world, accessible only through certain areas in the physical world. The author explained that those who enter the parallel world would have their souls taken away, leaving them empty and lifeless. The man realized that what he had encountered in the shopping mall was indeed real, and he was lucky to have escaped with his soul intact. Deep in the heart of a dense forest, there lived a tribe of people who had never ventured beyond its borders. They were content living off the land and had no knowledge of the outside world. Likewise, no one outside the forest knew of their existence. One night, as the tribe looked up at the sky, a strange light flickered across it. Fearful of this omen, the tribe consulted their ancestors' tales and discovered that it was a sign of impending doom, a falling star that spelled disaster for their people. Night after night, the light reappeared, and the tribe grew more and more anxious. Desperate to protect themselves, the tribe decided to call upon their ancient power and summon a curse to bring down the falling star. Their ritual was powerful, and they believed that their curse had been successful. What they didn't know was that the flickering light was not a star at all, but a commercial airplane passing overhead. The flight had recently changed its route, and it flew above the forest at the same time every night. Despite the tribe's ignorance, their curse took hold, and the airplane crashed to the ground, killing everyone on board. Even more tragically, the wreckage struck the village of the secret tribe, wiping out their entire population. The eerie coincidence was not lost on the tribe, who realized too late the true nature of the flickering light and the terrible consequences of their curse. The office had always been a place of productivity and focus, a space where the employees could work without distractions. But recently, a strange phenomenon had begun to occur, causing unease and fear among the workers. Every morning when they arrived at the office, they would find black smoke lingering in the air. It was like a dark fog that refused to dissipate, casting a pall over the entire workspace. Despite the presence of the smoke, the fire alarm in the building never sounded, leaving everyone confused and unsettled. Yoka had been working late one night, trying to meet a deadline. As she was typing away, she suddenly noticed the smoke starting to thicken around her. Alarmed, she ran to the kitchenette, thinking that something was on fire. But when she got there, she saw something that chilled her to the bone. The toaster was releasing black smoke, even though it wasn't plugged in or turned on. Yoka couldn't understand how this was possible, and she was too scared to stay in the office any longer. She left as quickly as she could and told the others what had happened the next day. Everyone was shocked and frightened by Yoka's story, but they agreed to throw away the toaster and hope that the strange phenomenon would stop. However, a week later, when they arrived at the office in the morning, the black smoke was still there, just as thick and unsettling as before. Several of Yoka's coworkers decided to stay late one night and tried to figure out where the smoke was coming from. They searched the entire office, looking for any signs of a fire or other disturbances. And then they found it. The microwave was releasing black smoke, even though it wasn't plugged in or turned on, just like the toaster. The workers were horrified and couldn't explain what was happening. They knew that they had to leave the office immediately and find a new workspace. Eventually, the company moved to a new building, and the strange phenomenon never occurred again. But Yoka and her coworkers never forgot the eerie and unsettling feeling that came over them every time they walked into the office, a feeling that seemed to be brought on by the mysterious black smoke that lingered in the air.
For as long as anyone could remember, a mysterious radio station had been playing an eerie song on repeat. It seemed to come from nowhere, with no discernible source or location. People from all around had tried calling the station to request they play something else, but the phone would just ring and ring, never picking up. The song was hauntingly beautiful, but it was also unsettling. There was something about it that made people feel uneasy, like they were being watched or followed. And yet, they couldn't stop listening. The Department of Communications had received countless complaints about the station, but no one could locate it. It was as if it existed in some other realm, beyond the reach of ordinary technology. Some people claimed that they could only hear the station late at night, when the rest of the world was asleep. As the weeks went by, more and more people became obsessed with the mysterious radio station. They would sit in their cars or huddle around their radios, waiting for the eerie song to start playing. Some people claimed that they could hear voices whispering in the background, while others said that they saw strange symbols flash across their screens. Despite the growing unease, no one could resist the allure of the station. It was like a siren's call, drawing people deeper and deeper into its dark embrace. And yet, no one knew what would happen if they were to meet the person behind the station. Rumors began to circulate that the station was run by a sinister figure, someone with supernatural powers who could control people's minds. People whispered about strange disappearances and bizarre rituals that were said to take place in the dead of night. No one knew for sure what was happening, but everyone could feel the palpable sense of fear and unease that hung over the city like a dark cloud. And still, the station played on, its eerie song echoing through the streets, a constant reminder of the unknown horrors that lurked just beyond the veil.
John sat behind the wheel of his delivery truck, driving down a long, winding road in the dead of night. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of the packages in the back of the truck. He had been on the road for hours, with miles of darkness stretching out ahead of him. Suddenly, a strange sound caught his attention. It was coming from the back of the truck, a muffled thump, followed by a scraping noise. He hit the brakes and pulled over to the side of the road, his heart racing as he got out of the truck. He walked to the back of the truck and opened the doors, revealing the rows of boxes and packages that he had loaded up earlier. There was nothing out of place, no sign of anything that could have made the noise. He told himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him and climbed back into the driver's seat. As he continued on his journey, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The road ahead seemed to twist and turn, becoming more and more treacherous with every mile. The sound of the packages in the back of the truck seemed to grow louder and more ominous, as if something was trying to escape from within. Just as he reached the peak of a particularly steep incline, the sound suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creaking of the truck's suspension. And then, without warning, the truck swerved violently off the road. John remembers the sound of crunching metal as the truck careened off the cliff, tumbling down into the darkness below. When he woke up, he was lying on the ground, his body aching with pain. The truck was nowhere to be seen. As the days passed, the police conducted an extensive search for the truck driver, but no trace of him was ever found. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but questions and a sense of eerie unease. And to this day, no one knows what really happened to John or the delivery truck. I was walking home alone from work, taking the usual shortcut through the deserted alleyway. It was already dark outside, and I could barely see anything in front of me. Suddenly, I heard a low growling noise and felt a strong gust of wind. I stopped dead in my tracks, heart pounding in my chest. That's when I saw him, a homeless man standing in the corner of the alleyway. He was covered in rags and dirt, with matted hair and a thick beard. His eyes glinted in the dim light, and his mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. I felt a shiver run down my spine. As I cautiously stepped closer, I saw him spit out something that made me retch. It was a wad of phlegm mixed with bits of food, and it landed with a sickening thud on the ground. The homeless man stared at me with a cold, menacing look, and I could feel his breath on my face. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs felt like lead. "Got a cigarette?" he rasped, holding out a filthy hand. I fumbled in my pocket and pulled out a pack, trying to keep my hands steady. He snatched it from my grasp, lit one up and inhaled deeply. The pungent smoke wafted over me, making me gag. I tried to make a quick exit, but the homeless man blocked my way. "You don't look so good, kid. Maybe you should sit down for a while." His voice was hoarse and gravelly, like he hadn't spoken in years. I felt trapped, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I didn't know what to do or say, and I felt like I was about to pass out. Suddenly, the homeless man reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. I yelped in pain and tried to pull away, but he held on tight. "Listen to me, kid," he hissed, his eyes burning into mine. "You're not safe out here. You need to be careful, or you might end up like me. Homeless, alone, and forgotten by the world." With that, he let go of my arm and disappeared into the shadows. I was left standing there, shaking and dazed, with the taste of vomit in my mouth. I stumbled home as fast as I could, feeling like someone was watching me every step of the way. And in a way, I knew that they were, the homeless man's warning echoing in my ears like a chilling prophecy.